Hey guys, I'm Matt Schlicht from Zapchain, and I'm here with Teemu, CEO of CoinMotion. Welcome. Tell us a little bit about CoinMotion.
Well, thanks for having me. CoinMotion is one of the largest exchange and wallet services in Europe for Bitcoin. We currently operate in 11 countries in Europe, and that's us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for helping us out with this Bitcoin course.
Yeah, no worries.
So let's get into it. So what is different about Bitcoin than finance previously?
Than finance or like traditional money?
Like traditional money. So now we have Bitcoin. It's kind of changed the game, and we can do a lot more things with it. Tell us a little bit about those things.
Well, the problem with traditional money obviously was that it was completely localized in a way which made it really difficult for people to transfer quickly between themselves. Now it's getting a little bit better, but Bitcoin, what it kind of allows you to do is to transfer, like I'm here with you in the States, I can transfer you money in a couple of minutes. And that's just never been possible before. And so it's pretty exciting for a bunch of industries where cross-border transfers are necessary, and they're actually pretty expensive. So now that there's Bitcoin, we can maybe streamline all those processes and make it really cheap in the same time.
Cool. So Bitcoin obviously is worth something, and people are spending it, they're buying things, they're sending it to each other. But where is the value of Bitcoin coming from? Like, what's backing Bitcoin?
Well, yeah, that's the first question everybody in finance always asks. The value comes out of the community, out of the people transacting with it. Similarly, with most currencies, there's not actually anything of value except the promise. In traditional currencies, that promise is made by the government or the central bank, while in Bitcoin, it's kind of a similar thing, except the promise is from the community. So no central authority, but a general understanding. And it's the same way all money works nowadays, is unless the person you're trying to pay understands that there is promised value in this, then it's not going to work.
So is it just because people are willing to spend money on it? Like people are exchanging it for a certain amount of money, and so that's where it gets its worth?
No, it's more that people are, well, yes, as converting it into other currencies or physical objects, like buying stuff, is what brings it value. All it requires, anything to have value, is that someone is willing to give you something back for that. So if I want to buy a car and someone is willing to sell me a car for Bitcoin, then that means Bitcoin has value, even if it is, in that case, just between those two people.
Right. So a lot of people have compared Bitcoin to gold. But one of the big differences between like gold and cash is that people are regularly spending cash every day to make transactions, whereas people are using gold as kind of a store of value. Do you think Bitcoin is going to be a store of value, or are people going to be using it in everyday transactions?
Well, I think the Bitcoin gold comparison is a pretty valid one. The reason gold cannot be used for payments is just because it's impossible to lug around and actually use in transactions very efficiently. And so Bitcoin kind of solves that problem. So I do think that there will be transactions happening in Bitcoin, because if you had gold and you could use it anywhere in the world with a smartphone, then you probably would.
That would be awesome.
It would be pretty cool.
Bitcoin. Yeah. So we've had credit cards, or at least a lot of the world has had access to credit cards, and that's made transactions really easy. What benefits does Bitcoin have over credit cards? Is it easier to make a transaction?
Well, it's more secure to make a transaction is one. Probably not easier. From like a European or an American consumer's perspective, the difference isn't that big when you're actually paying to a company who accepts credit cards. For the merchant or the company accepting, there is a difference. Generally, margins are pretty thin as it is, and credit card companies take quite a big cut. And so companies can avoid that. and they can hopefully at least pass that saving on to their consumers. And then also, when we start talking about people in countries where they don't have access to that, then this is kind of another way of doing it. And credit card companies have no incentive to try and help those people, basically.
I think that's actually a super interesting topic, because most people don't know that there's actually a large amount of people that don't have access to banks or credit cards. And there's people that they have access to phones, and they're using minutes on their phones as a form of currency because they could send them to each other. But now they have Bitcoin. So have you seen adoption with Bitcoin in countries where they were kind of exchanging minutes or other forms of currency?
Well, I mean, Bitcoin adoption in developing countries is definitely growing really quickly. The problem they have, well, right now a lot of people are trying to crack the remittance problem, transferring money back home, which typically has ridiculously high fees, and it's pretty slow. So Bitcoin can definitely help with that. The problem with Bitcoin right now is no one is buying Bitcoin in those countries. And for that kind of system to work, you need the money coming back as well.
So how could we get them Bitcoin? Like, how do you think that'll eventually happen?
You mean how could we use Bitcoin to do the remittance?
If people in third world countries, if they aren't buying Bitcoin right now, but Bitcoin could be a huge benefit to them because basically access to banking from wherever they are, how would we get that set up?
So that's the best and the easiest way is for every place, and there's all of the shops, all the companies accept Bitcoin. So you create a Bitcoin ecosystem. Then you don't need the conversion happening the other way.
Right.
If they can use the Bitcoin as it is. If they need to cash out, then there also needs to be transactions going the other way. So with just only Bitcoin, you can completely fix that. And then people here can buy into Bitcoin, send the Bitcoin, and people in the developing countries can just use the Bitcoin as it is.
Right. So would you say that when the world is doing that and everything is Bitcoin, that's kind of when we've reached mass adoption? So I'm getting paid in Bitcoin, and then I can go buy lunch with Bitcoin, and I never kind of have to convert it back to fiat?
Yeah, well, I think we're far off from that, but to some extent. So in the Western world, we'll probably never see that because there's no need for it. Pretty much everybody has bank accounts, everybody has smartphones, blah, blah. You don't really need that. You don't need Bitcoin day to day in the same way. In developing countries where there are a lot of unbanked people, there it's much more beneficial to have that ecosystem. And so I don't think you or me will ever do that. But for them, once enough merchants and stuff accept Bitcoin, they will be able to do that. And I think, that does mean like mass adoption. But it's not going to be worldwide. It's going to be in only the countries where it's needed, I think.
So do you think that the United States or other developed countries will be using Bitcoin, but maybe it's not specifically me using Bitcoin for transactions, but maybe the banks start using Bitcoin and the blockchain to kind of power finance?
That's definitely possible. I think Fedor is already kind of doing that, not with Bitcoin, but anyway, similar thing. So banks, big companies, anybody who has to do large cross-border transfers will definitely sooner or later start using Bitcoin. It's easier, it's cheaper, it's the best way to do it. But yeah, you won't be buying like your groceries with Bitcoin. But if you have a friend somewhere overseas, then you probably would be using Bitcoin for that.
Right. Yeah, no, it's I don't think most people know this either, but back to remittance, where someone is coming from another country, they're coming to the United States, they're working really hard, they're making money, and then they're sending it back to their family.
Yeah.
Currently, the most popular way to do that is using Western Union.
Yeah.
And, they take, 10, 20% of that?
Something like that, yeah. I think it varies, but it is a significant amount of money from that
That's crazy.
amount that's sending, yeah.
Whereas Bitcoin would be what?
Well, yeah, Bitcoin inherently has no fees. You will, of course, be paying conversion fees, but I think I think within a couple of years, we're going to see those conversion fees go down to like 0.1, 0.2%. So significantly less than what you would ever be able to do with a traditional money sending operation.
Do you think Bitcoin will have much of an impact on Europe?
I think the impact is going to be similar. Europe obviously has a pretty consolidated financial market, and what I mean by that is that we have the SEPA transfer, which is like a standardized transfer for the whole euro area. But similarly as with the United States, we'll have the larger institutions probably using Bitcoin to do their transfers, and then the similar remittance thing as well. Then Europe does have more kind of reason to use Bitcoin because there are so many fragmented markets than the United States does. But
right. So with credit cards, if I go spend money with my credit card at a merchant, there is a chance that someone could go steal my credit card information.
yeah.
So is Bitcoin more secure than that? And how does that work exactly?
Yeah, so this is what I mentioned earlier, that it is a more secure way of paying. It is more secure because when you pay with Bitcoin, you're not giving your information to anyone. You're only giving them the money. While credit cards, you stick your credit cards in every e-commerce shop you go to, which means they're generally very vulnerable. But if somebody hacks whatever online store, there's no way they can get any information they can use against you if you've been using Bitcoin. And so that's obviously a better way of ensuring your own financial privacy and security.
Right, but so people could still steal your information from the merchants, even if you were using Bitcoin, right? They could still get your address and your name.
Yeah.
Do you think Bitcoin can solve that problem, where maybe I could not sign up for an account with Amazon, and instead I could just be sending Bitcoin, and then with the Bitcoin actually goes on, my data is all on there?
Oh, like on the Bitcoin. Yeah, it's completely possible. I don't think it'll solve, the addresses and everything else will be in their databases anyway. You need to tell them where to ship it and everything. But yeah, there's definitely potential for you to basically verify you or you're making an order kind of on blockchain, which would be an interesting project. I think some people are working on something similar to that anyway.
Yeah, I think that would be super cool, because then literally nobody could get hacked, or even if they were hacked, they couldn't steal anything. And the most anyone could ever steal is they could steal your information, and not 100,000 people.
Yeah, but I mean, if it's on the blockchain, it's available.
That's true.
So
somebody out there needs to figure this out.
Yeah, so I don't think there's a big problem if somebody gets your address. But getting a credit card, you can literally go online and pay for stuff if you have someone else's credit card information.
Right.
And with Bitcoin, that will just not be possible.
So do you trust Bitcoin more than you trust your credit card?
Yeah, I definitely do. Your credit card information is all over the place, obviously. And that's why, it is. Every place you bought at, they've got the records of your credit card. They could theoretically use your credit card to pay for stuff. Anybody who gets access to that can pay for it. Your Bitcoin information is not so readily accessible. And I think trusting Bitcoin is trusting a proven technology over a central authority, which is mostly made up of people making decisions, doing quantitative easing or whatever, pushing money, new money into the market, deflating, inflating, affecting the currency. And so here, I'm putting my trust in a technology I understand, which is built on the same kind of security stuff that's used everywhere, like what the banks use, the police use, except I'm the only one who's in control. While if you're using a bank, the bank is in control. It's like having an off-chain Bitcoin company where nobody knows really what's going on inside. And how the banks work currently, I think, is much more untrustworthy than Bitcoin. Because banks work on a so-called fractional reserve basis, which means that when you put money into a bank, they're going to go off and lend it to someone else. And so they have a fraction of your money in their holdings. And so when there is a financial crisis or a bank run, which means that everybody is trying to take their money out of the bank account, your money could just disappear. And you don't really ever know what's happening there. It's just like numbers on a screen. While Bitcoin, I know 100% sure that my money is in my wallet. It's not going anywhere from there. I can check off the blockchain, I can make a transaction, whatever, and I'm the only one who determines what happens to that. If I want to lend it, I will, but it's not going to be someone else just doing all that.
Right. I mean, and it's safe too, right? It's encrypted. It's using SHA-256, which is the same thing that Facebook uses to encrypt their passwords.
It's the same thing. Well, it's the highest level of encryption there is. It's like if there was a problem with SHA-256, we would have much bigger problems in the world than just Bitcoin.
Right. And so I think most people probably don't understand this or realize this, and maybe they're scared of using Bitcoin because it's insecure, but actually it is more secure than a credit card.
Yeah, it definitely is, but of course in Bitcoin as well, there's a matter of like personal security. So you can like very securely have your Bitcoins on your own computer, have a wallet on your own computer. The problem is you do need to understand how to make a secure wallet.
Right.
Most people don't really pay attention to viruses and stuff that much. And that's pretty important in Bitcoin. And that's why there are so many companies like CoinMotion, which offer like security, but no hassle. So you don't need to know anything. You can just store it there and we'll take care of it for you. And
right,
I'm pretty
awesome.
Sure we're doing it better than most people. So.
And then you'll just make sure that my Bitcoins are never stolen.
Yeah.
You're like a Bitcoin bank.
Not officially.
Right. So if you are holding my Bitcoins on CoinMotion and you're also holding all of your customers' Bitcoins, doesn't that make you a centralized authority and put all of our Bitcoins at risk?
Well, there's a few ways to look at that. And so you can have two different kinds of Bitcoin services, basically. One creates an actual wallet for all their customers and keeps the money on the blockchain, and the other one pulls them together. The benefit of having an off-chain wallet is that the company can use cold storage, which means take all those Bitcoins or most of their Bitcoins offline. Like we have our Bitcoins stored in bank vaults in Finland, and that means that they're impossible to steal. But that also means that they're not instantly accessible all the time.
Well, unless someone robs the bank.
Unless someone robs 3 banks, yeah.
Right.
Which would be pretty cool, kind of. Not for our customers.
It won't happen. The banks won't get robbed.
But I mean, it would be an event in history. The first physical Bitcoin theft from banks. Anyway, so on the
where are your banks located again? We could have them try to steal it.
Yeah, well, well, they're in.
It's secret. It's confidential.
It's very confidential. Yeah. Yes, in Finland.
Right.
I'm just gonna say stuff. Anyway, so when you're off blockchain, you can like ensure security. Every time you're on blockchain, it means that either the company or the user, depending on how it's built, can be hacked potentially because they're usable. You can transact with them if you get a hold of their details. If they're offline, they're not usable in any way, and they're like perfectly safe. And so there's pros and cons to both. But that's the reason why a lot of companies like Circle, Coinbase use the cold storage method. It's just the safest way to do it right now.
Right. Most of these companies are putting even over 90% of the Bitcoins they're holding into cold storage too.
Yeah, we hold about 95% of our customer funds in cold storage.
Right. So if you got hacked and CoinMotion got hacked, the most that could be stolen would be 5%.
The most could be stolen right now would be 5%. It's constantly decreasing the amount we hold online, and we do make sure that we'll always have enough cash to refund whatever could be stolen. But it's more of a security measure. There's not much risk of it being stolen.
Right. I mean, it sounds pretty safe. Like someone could hack, my computer, get my credit card information, and then they could spend a lot. Whereas if they hack you, it doesn't sound like I would lose that much of my Bitcoins, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, and that's the reason to be off chain. Then there's the companies that are on chain, where you can actively check your balance from the blockchain, do stuff like that, which is really nice. But I think before we started seeing multi-signature wallets, we didn't really have a way of ensuring security for that kind of service. And so most of the companies or services that have been hacked or robbed have not been using cold storage. So, or they have, but they haven't been secure enough online. And I think multi-signature for the first time is making it possible to have your Bitcoins online, get the benefits of Bitcoin while still maintaining security.
Right. I mean, in multisig or multi-signature transactions, right, it's basically enabling multiple parties to have to confirm before the transactions can be sent.
Yeah.
And so we didn't even have this before, right? This is kind of a new thing.
I think there's multisig has been around in some form or another. I think it's currently becoming usable enough to actually make an effect on the industry. But it's not a new idea. It's just now we're starting to figure out how to implement it effectively.
Right.
And as you said, it requires more than one party. That's kind of the definition to authorize a transaction.
Right. And so you have, so on CoinMotion, 5% of the coins are not in cold storage.
Yeah.
But you also have multisig with those 5%.
No.
So is that something that you're working on? So okay, because then at that point, if people, obviously they're not going to get the 95% of coins because those are in a bank, so they'd have to actually get guns in the tank and go rob a bank. And currently, they theoretically could hack the 5%, but once you have multisig set up, which kind of all the Bitcoin companies are doing right now, they would also have to kidnap me to get my, password or key?
Yeah, so we're rolling out a new version, and actually we won't be using cold storage in the same way. We'll be using multi-signature wallets, so your whole balance will be online all the time, and it'll be so your password will encrypt one of the private keys. And so every time there's a transaction, it needs our system to OK it and you to OK it.
Right.
Which means if somebody hacks us, they can't move the coins. And if someone hacks you, the most they could do is just move your coins, but not everybody's coins. Yeah. And generally, just because of two-factor authentication and stuff like that, if you use those very simple, very effective safety measures, it should be next to impossible to take anyone's coins. And that's, I think, the really exciting thing, because for the first time we'll have, you'll be able to check your monies on the blockchain, which is inherently a big part of Bitcoin. And then also, so you'll be able to check your money is on the blockchain, and so this fractional reserve stuff won't happen, where we won't be operating with less money than what our customers have, which is the worry in a lot of companies, empty gogs.
Right. So can I, right now, if I have 100 Bitcoins on CoinMotion, can I actually go verify on the blockchain that those 100 Bitcoins are at CoinMotion?
No.
Can I verify with you?
Theoretically.
But, right.
Like, it's a matter of, like,
But that would be
to
nice
verify,
if I could.
it would more just be, like, you trusting us. Because we have a whole bunch of Bitcoins. So how do you know if that's your 100 we're showing you?
Right. So do you have a plan to make it so that I could actually verify my 100?
Yeah. Okay. So with the multisignature we're rolling out, you will be able to check the blockchain to see that you have exactly the amount you should have.
Right. Which is awesome.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, that's what happened with Mt. Gox, right? They said that they had, $400 million worth of Bitcoin, and people tried to pull their Bitcoin out, and it turned out that Mt. Gox had been hacked and someone had slowly taken most of this capital, and we didn't have any way to verify whether or not our capital was actually in there.
Yeah, and this auditing thing is a big trust builder as well, because like currently the way Bitcoin companies are audited, or audited, I would say, is they make, for example, Bitstamp makes one big transfer of their whole holdings.
Right.
And then you can see that on the blockchain, which is great, because then you know that they have a lot of money or whatever.
But how do we know how much they're supposed to have?
Exactly. We don't know how much they should have, so it's not a very effective way of auditing in the end. And then there's this practice of having a neutral party come in and look through your records and whatever.
Neutral party?
I don't know, but a neutral party, whoever that may be. Usually they're significant figures in the Bitcoin space,
right?
Generally trusted by the community, but even that, it's not the same as having people be able to check the blockchain and be like, this is my money.
Right. Like and that's, even if I went and checked like Wells Fargo to see if I had my money in there, that doesn't actually even mean anything.
No.
Because that's just a website telling me a number.
Yeah.
Which it could tell me whatever it wanted, and it doesn't mean that's how many dollars I actually have. Whereas Bitcoin's pretty awesome, because once you have this set up, I actually could go verify on the blockchain, which you can't manipulate and I can't manipulate, and it's just completely trusted.
Yeah.
And I could go verify that I actually had that many coins, and that's totally new thing. No one's ever had that before.
Yeah, and then there's also the benefit of being able to use your whole balance whenever you want, which with the cold storage method is impossible.
Right. Plus, even with banks, you have spending limits.
Yeah, and the spending limits are more for your own safety, and so it's not so much that there's a limit in their system. It's just that they want to limit it somehow, so that if your stuff does get stolen, which is surprisingly easy nowadays, people can't just use like 1 million of your euros or whatever.
Right. Or dollars in my case.
Oh, yes.
So if I was someone that I have some Bitcoin, but I may not totally understand everything about Bitcoin, would you recommend that a person like that tries to store their Bitcoin themselves, or uses, someone like CoinMotion to kind of handle that and put it into cold storage and, make sure they're using multisig and protecting it?
I would definitely not suggest storing them yourself. It's if that whole thing is of interest, then definitely explore it, try out some wallets. But to start off with, use a trusted service like CoinMotion, like any of the other bigger companies. They're generally pretty good, and they're often insured as well. So there's not much worry there. When you store it with yourself, you do need to learn a little bit. There's a bit of a learning curve, and then additionally, the personal computers are probably the easiest to hack or break into.
So basically, if you're going to experiment with it, do it with a really tiny amount.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting and it's fun to play around with, but just make sure it's not a lot of money.
Right.
And then generally, the services like CoinMotion are much easier to take your first step in, because it's just made so simple. It's just buying and selling, and there's none of the hassle that's kind of involved with Bitcoin usually.
Right. And I think that's something that most people don't realize, is that Bitcoin is really technical and really complicated, but at the same time, so is programming and a lot of other things in the world. And so most people will probably never need to understand everything about Bitcoin, and they'll just rely on you or someone like you, someone like CoinMotion, to kind of understand how Bitcoin works and kind of take care of that for them and just make it super easy.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about it, the traditional banking system isn't super easy either. You need like these long ass like account numbers to make transfers. You need BIC codes. You need reference numbers. All this stuff, which is like at this point in time, they still haven't figured out like how I can just send money to anyone in the world if they have a bank account. It's just like without going through that whole hassle. That's what Bitcoin does, and I think there is a learning curve to Bitcoin, but in the end, it's not at its most difficult. It's still not that difficult. So I think it's definitely something that everyone can get.
Well, I mean, especially like on CoinMotion though, right? Because like I can go to CoinMotion, I can buy a Bitcoin, and then you can hold it for me.
Yeah, it's that easy.
Like it's really.
And I mean,
not
then like if your friend wants you to send him some Bitcoin, he gives you an address, and then you send it to that address. It's.
You actually have to get less information to send a Bitcoin than if you're going to send a wire.
Oh yeah, much
because a
less.
wire requires like three different pieces of information, I think.
But it doesn't, and there's no reason for that. I mean, like.
Well, they're just not as secure as Bitcoin.
Yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. So earlier you said that Bitcoin has no fees, but that's not completely true, right?
No. So yeah, I mentioned that like inherently Bitcoin has no fees. It does indeed have a miner's fee, which is right now it's a minuscule part, and it's not large enough to affect any like transactions, or it's not large enough to consider when making transactions.
So when you say miner's fee, what do you mean by that?
So when you make a transaction, and all these miners are basically verifying your transactions, and so they get a little reward for doing that as an incentive to use their processing power to verify the transactions. And it's currently really small. It's possible that it will go up as the difficulty increases. You need to give the miners more incentive, but also with Bitcoin's like adoption growing, Bitcoin's price should also go up, and then we should have a better correlation between them, even though there's no direct causality. And then there is the worry that the miner's fee will go up so high that it won't be like reasonable to transact in Bitcoin anymore. And I don't think that's really something anybody should fret about, because Bitcoin is kind of the first experiment right now. It's the biggest, it's the most impressive so far, and we're still learning. Like, Bitcoin is being developed. It's not set in stone. Stuff will change, and then hopefully at some point we'll figure out like the perfect system to make it work.
Which is pretty fascinating.
It is.
It's pretty crazy that someone that we don't know who they are.
Well, we do.
We don't.
The core devs, or you mean
no,
Satoshi?
But so the creator of Bitcoin from the beginning, like, it almost sounds like a movie. Like some guy that goes by Satoshi Nakamoto, which sounds like some sort of samurai, made Bitcoin, and now we're kind of left here to like play with it. We're in a giant experiment, basically.
Yeah, and I mean, but that's what you need. I mean, everything starts off as a giant experiment, especially if you're going to try and revolutionize an industry which has been relatively the same for like hundreds of years.
Yeah.
But it's open source, so I don't think it's that worrying that we don't know who like invented it.
No, I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's like, what other industry has a Satoshi Nakamoto in it?
Yeah.
Like farmers don't have
how many
that.
mystical figures in the world are there generally? I mean,
There's like
he's
Jesus
up there.
and Satoshi.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
That is pretty much it.
Yeah.
There's a couple more, but
I can't think of any important ones. So you are based in Europe.
Yeah.
And you're trying to enable Europe to get Bitcoins and sell Bitcoins really easily, right? So have you actually bought anything in Europe with Bitcoin? Like, what was the last thing you bought in Europe with Bitcoin?
I bought dinner at a restaurant in Helsinki.
How'd that go?
Great. Took about 30 seconds. And then I had some salmon and potatoes in front of me. It's fantastic.
There you go. Bitcoin. It can get you salmon and potato in Europe. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for helping with this course. I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot about Bitcoin.
Oh, definitely. And, if you have any more questions, I'm always available.
Awesome. All right. Bye, guys.